god, I love the TTYD remake so much. It encapsulates the magic of the original so well while looking amazing and staying incredibly close to the source material. The attention to detail they put into everything is nuts, and the few changes and additions to this 20-year-old game are so great to see after all this time. Granted, there might be some things it doesn't completely fix, and the music might not be as good as the original sometimes, but I think they did more than enough. Which is why I immediately knew that just 100%ing this game wasn't enough. I knew I needed to do some sort of challenge run. But what exactly is there to do? Go through the game without upgrading health? FP? BP? How about all three? That's right, I'm going to be beating Paper Mario the Thousand Year Door without leveling up. Now you might be thinking, can you actually go through the entire game without getting a level up? And the answer is no. However, what I'm going to do is simulate not leveling up by simply putting every level I do get into BP and just never using more than the 3 BP you start with. Also, since this challenge isn't hard enough as is, I decided to not use any life shrooms. And since that wasn't enough, I made it so that I start with double pain unlocked. Don't ask me why I do these things. Well, anyways, without further ado, this is... Once we've docked at Rogueport, I immediately put on double pain as well as my custom skin. After that, it's time for the classic tutorial fight against Lord Crump, and yup, double pain already works here. Upon taking care of this guy, having Goombella join our party, and getting a quick exposition dump from Frankly, it's time for an actual first fight. Of course, the whole level 1 thing isn't really a problem at the beginning of the game, and double pain also doesn't really make these guys any harder. I usually tried skipping as many enemies as I could in this playthrough, since fighting them doesn't really give me anything. I mean money I suppose, but that shouldn't really be a concern either way. Well, after getting brutally cursed and going up to the Thousand Year Door for the first time, there's not really all that much left to do in the prologue other than the blooper fight. This guy also doesn't pose a threat, since you can just kill him so quickly by using a fire flower to take care of his tentacles and then just stomping him a bunch. Okay, that's it for the prologue. Ah, Petal Meadows, what a nice first area. Again, we don't really need to fight any of the enemies along the way. Instead we can simply grab the absurd amount of items that they give you out here, have a couple awkward conversations, and then just start moving towards Schwong Fortress, where we do have a couple mandatory fights. There's the Stage Hazard tutorial fight that was newly added in the remake, followed by the Clefts that I actually beat with a Power Smash and some Super Guards, these guys that I of course just used the Power Block on, and of course, who could forget the Fuzzies. Quick side note, did you know this guy just gives you an absolute freebie if you get to the last question? Like, seriously, look at this. Anyways, I dodged the Fuzzies in the corridors and then just used a couple items on these guys because they give you even more down here now. The gold Fuzzy also shouldn't be a problem, I mean he only has 10 HP. However, if you're like me and you try to super guard all of these guys for some reason, it could get a little scary. I think I was honestly saved by the fact that they don't even bother attacking you if you get lucky in this version. With both the stones collected, we can run into Koops again, who joins our party for real this time, and then just move on to Hooktail Castle. There's actually not a lot of mandatory fights in this place. Only this guy, who is quite the pushover if you just use Koops to get rid of all his fellas immediately. Hold on a second, he has 3 damage normally. Why did that attack only do 4 when I guarded it? To answer that, we need to talk about Parallel Universe. We need to talk about how the double pain badge actually works. Because I originally just assumed that it just doubles the damage that enemies deal. However, that seems to not be the case. Instead, whatever damage negating effects Mario has get applied to the enemy's attack first, and then that damage gets doubled. For instance, guarding this guy's attack makes the damage go down from 3 to 2, which then gets doubled to be 4. If I had further defense, by using a Courage Shell for example, this damage would further go down, meaning he would actually deal no damage instead of the 3 damage you might assume. Alright, after taking care of him, I did the puzzles in this place, dodged all the enemies as well as I could, got cursed once again, grabbed the attack effects badge, that I'm obviously not going to use since I'm not a coward, and made my way to Hooktail. Not using the badge means that Hooktail does a lot of damage, and I might have been very greedy and gone into the fight without healing, thinking that I could just super guard the first attack, which cost me a couple of deaths. After not being cocky anymore, it's actually not that bad. And there we go. That's the first crystal star. A second visit to the door later, I upgraded coops, grabbed a couple extra things throughout Rogueport, and made my way to the boggy woods. I'm not gonna lie. The backtrack-ridden nature of this game becomes pretty apparent sometimes when you're not even fighting enemies. Well, after going to the tree, going to Flurry Space, and then going back to the start, it's already time for a mandatory fight. The sirens are pretty scary like this. 3 separate enemies that attack you with this amount of damage is not pleasant. Also, they all decided to just attack Mario for some reason, and I suck at guarding them, so I was very glad that I put Close Call on for this fight. They still managed to get me once, but on the next attempt I just used Earth Tremor, which let me get rid of 2 of them very quickly, followed by a few more turns to take care of Marilyn, and that's that. Back to Flurry's place, where she joins our party, and then back to the Great Tree, where we've got to fight a couple X-Nauts. It was pretty annoying that this guy had a Fire Flower, but I could just barely tank it, so we're fine. Now it's time to help the Punies out, which again is pretty straightforward if you just dodge most of the enemies here. I did have to fight some enemies, like these spiders, in order to get the Punies to where they needed to go, but since super guarding these guys is completely free, they're not a problem. After getting the super boots as well as the charge badge and moving through the rest of the tree, we have to fight another quick fight while trying not to blow up, upon which we're already at this chapter's boss. Honestly, this guy doesn't really need to be on screen all that long. I think he's actually easier than Hooktail without her weakness anyways, which holds especially true here, since our main concern is taking damage, and this guy does less than half of hers. I put on charge for this fight, and then just used that to deal a bunch of damage, took care of his hands with an Earth Tremor, and it just took a few more turns of normal attacks for him to go down. That's it for chapter 2. Honestly, still no real problems here yet. However, the consequences of not leveling up will get progressively worse as the game goes on, so this should be pretty interesting. Before going over to chapter 3, I once again grabbed a couple things around Rogueport, went back to the door, upgraded Goombella, and traded in some more star pieces. All that's needed to start chapter 3 is the blimp ticket that you get from Don Pianta, but apparently you can only get up to his office once you've actually bought the information on how to get there. Gus isn't really an issue. It is kinda scary when he decides to throw a spear at Mario, but he's actually not that hard to superguard in my opinion. Just give this dude his coins and we can actually get up to Don Pianta, go get his daughter and get ourselves the blimp ticket. Here we are in Glitzville. You know how this goes. We get signed up as a fighter and start making our way up the ranks. Obviously, every fight in this chapter is a mandatory one, so no dodging enemies here. However, the fact that you can just heal yourself in between all of them makes it a whole lot easier. Of course, we just blazed through the first few fights, even though we do still get a lot of star points from these, even from the Goombas, which I thought was kinda funny. The fight conditions are also something you need to pay attention to here. I didn't get any that were all that devastating for the first fights, after which I went and grabbed the Yoshi egg. I wanted to get the blue Yoshi and got the egg quite early, so I had to hurry through the next 4 fights. Not being able to use my hammer against these clefts was pretty annoying. I basically just had to superguard them a bunch, but the next fight's condition made it a cakewalk. At this point, we're already at the fight against the iron clefts, which we obviously can't win yet, so I just ran immediately, and look at that, I actually still got the blue Yoshi, even though I was cutting it close. I gave him a very creative name, and could now take care of these guys, landing us in the Major League. The fights out here do get considerably harder, but the first ones are still fine. Yoshi's defense piercing is really helpful, even though it also hogs a lot of FP. We also start getting mails from X now, the first one of which tells us to go to the bar, where we get the Super Hammer. This fight was a rough one, since they apparently love attacking Mario. Like they literally did not attack my partner a single time for some reason. Well, I just had to hit 2 super guards on these guys real quick. Oh yeah, Bowser also shows up right after this one, but I hit some nice multi-bounces and sweet treats, making him not that bad. I like the fact that you can tell when I had to do math during these fights, since I don't tattle most enemies. After a bit more X action and a few more fights, this one actually being pretty tough, it's already time for the champion match. As usual, this guy's kinda just a gateway to the actual, more exciting boss of this chapter. He's easy to guard, and this very helpful bingo and the fact that I got to freeze him made this fight even more free. Time for the actual boss fight. Not gonna lie, Grubber is a lot scarier. The fact that he can buff himself so much means that he's able to deal loads of damage occasionally, and that it's not even worth attacking him all the time. Let's see how this goes. Damn, that was a clutch super guard. Okay, Crystal Star number 3. Back to Rogueport, back to the door, and time for chapter 4. Of course I upgraded Yoshi as well, before getting rejected, talking to some dude in an alleyway, and then already being able to enter chapter 4. Very quick start to this chapter, and chapter 4 itself is also quite short. It's already shorter in the remake, but there's also barely any mandatory fights here. Anyways, let's watch a couple people turn into pigs, get cursed once more, and run past all the enemies on our way to Creepy Steeple. Probably some of the hardest enemies to dodge out here, since the pathways are so narrow, but Flurry is really helpful when dealing with stuff like this. After arriving at Creepy Steeple for the first time, I decided to do Atomic Boo to get a little more content out of this chapter. His damage output is kinda scary, but with the buff from the strongest special move in the game, he's gone pretty quickly, and we get a badge that's not even usable. Yay! Okay, time to get our name stolen. Dupless is such a fun character, but not a very difficult boss. I mean, I suck at guarding his normal attacks, but he still doesn't do enough damage to really pose a threat. And after a couple turns of attacking him, that's it for this chapter. Nah, just kidding, it's not that short. Dodging the enemies in the woods is a lot harder now that Flurry is gone, but I still managed to pull it off somehow. Running into Dupless again, it's time to try to guess his name. Is it Glimmerdo? Apparently not. Whatever, after helping out Vivian and getting her to join the team, time to run back one more time in order to get the P and his name. Hey Dupless. Man, it feels good to just go through a pipe instead of running after him. Of course there's always a little time for a trivia break. But after that, it's time to finish this. The fact that he has partners now does of course make him a lot harder, but I just used the boost sheet I just got for the first few turns in which Vivian was gone, buffed up, and now these guys don't even stand a chance. I kinda wish Dupless just copied your stats when he steals your name, that would have been pretty funny. This Boo tried to be a little annoying, and I killed Goombella, which honestly didn't really make sense, since the other guys are way more annoying, but it looks like I can just super guard everyone, so no problem. Okay, that's actually going to be it for the shortest chapter in the game. With our name regained, it's time to go to the door again. Just gotta convince the most annoying and the most miserable person to join our squad. Whenever I play this game, I can't believe they actually put something this depressing in here. But then again, the next game in the series was this, so never mind I guess. Side note, money really isn't a concern in this run, because I can essentially just sell all the badges that use more than 3 BP, some of which are worth quite a lot. Alright, time to set out to sea, where we're definitely not gonna run into some sort of horrible pirate's curse. Oh god damn it. After arriving at the island, there's immediately a mandatory fight, which I didn't even remember, but I managed to shrink most of these guys, and also I'm just completely insane at this game apparently. After this, it gets pretty straightforward for a while. Some of these enemies are kinda hard to dodge, but after getting the 4th wall broken and grabbing a coconut for later, it's time to go over here, go back to the camp, go back over here, go back to the camp, and then go back over here again, at which point we can already enter the cave. This place is pretty chill, it's more tedious than anything. There's actually quite a few more mandatory fights, mostly in the form of these bullet bill blasters, but it's not that hard to take care of one of them on the first turn, upon which they don't really pose a threat because you can just kill everything they spew out. After moving past all the obstacles, there's some more bullet bill blasters, the final curse chest, which isn't super happy about its situation, as well as some more of these flame guys that didn't go quite as well as the first batch, and this weird bulky Bob-omb fight that they added in the remake. I just used Art Attack to take care of this one. Now that we have the boat ability, we can already go to the end of this area and take on Cortez. Whew, that guy was definitely a step up in difficulty. I'm pretty happy I got that on the first try. After getting the 5th crystal star, there's still one more thing to take care of before getting off this island. Honestly, I was also a little scared to fight this guy, but I think there was just hero mode PTSD, because this guy is way easier than I remembered. A power lift pretty much nullifies everything this guy does in his first 2 phases. That combined with a really lucky bingo and a few nice super guards made this fight a cakewalk. Door time! We're pretty far into the game now, but before entering chapter 6 there's actually quite a few things to do. Merlin tells us about the vision he had, and Mrs. Mouse's trouble is now accessible, so I made the trek over to the depths of Hawkow Castle, grabbing the up arrow and the elusive badge. This means we can now get Mouse to join our team and upgrade a bunch more partners. Now all there's left to do is just get these 2 back to their boss, and then we've got ourselves a ticket to the Excess Express. This chapter once again doesn't really have that much value in this challenge, since it's very story driven. I mean, don't get me wrong, I really like this one, but there's barely even any fights, mandatory or not. It's mainly made up of solving the passengers' problems, so a nice little calm before the incoming storm. We do eventually arrive at Riverside Station, of course, one of the coolest areas in the game in my opinion, but again, we can just dodge all the enemies, get the ultra boots and free these little freaks before moving on. When we wake up the next day, there's a bunch of knockoff fuzzies holding up the train and, well, it's time for the boss of this chapter already. I genuinely don't understand why they gave these guys such little health. They are such a cool boss concept, which is why I started out kinda holding back on them in order to actually see some of it, but after dying twice because of that, I buffed up, used a few items and then killed them before they could even enter the second phase. Afterwards, all that's left is to go over to the Sanctum and grab the Crystal Star in here. We're getting there, only one more of these door visits before it actually opens. Time for, honestly, probably my least favorite chapter. I mean, the X-Nord Fortress is great, but everything before that is just kinda dull. Well, before even starting that, we can grab the Ultra Hammer as well as all of the other stuff that's left in and around Rogueport. Getting all the Shine Sprites here even lets us upgrade almost all of our partners to the max. Now we can enter the pipe down here and get started on the most annoying part of the game. Luckily, it's not even nearly as bad in the remake. The pipe room really helps out a lot, meaning we can quickly go back over here and after getting past all the enemies again, which are honestly quite hard to dodge, we can wake this guy up and hop right on into the cannon. Up here, there's only a few more enemies to dodge, followed by these guys in the fortress. After dodging all the X-Nords in these tight corridors and grabbing 1, 2, 3 keys, it's time for a final round of trivia. Which also isn't all that hard if you've played this game as much as I have. That's all 4 keys collected, meaning we can move on to the final area of this place. I suck at doing this room, I always need to jump through the stuff like 4 times. Nonetheless, after getting through, it's time to refight Crump one last time. Wow, that was kind of a difficulty spike. Still nothing too insane though. After getting the hell out of this place, we're immediately told to go to the door, but of course I had to do a bunch of prep before starting the final chapter. I maxed the last partner, made a lot of money, bought a bunch of items from like everywhere in the world, and even cooked some stuff. Once I was fully decked out, it was time to enter the Shadow Palace. The start is of course more classic enemy dodging, however I figured out that double pane apparently also works outside of fights. There's also some bullet bill blasters blocking the way once again. These guys are a little bit more scary, but there's still enough ways to kill one of them before they can even start shooting stuff. After that and a couple more obstacles, it's time for these dudes. They're pretty scary. I already used some of my items here and also had to super guard them a bunch, but that's not even the worst part. What sucks most about them is the fact that they get up after 2 turns if at least one of them is still standing. Somehow though, I barely managed to fumble my way into the win before more of them could get rest. After this we've got the maze, and then we're already at this area and at the next boss. He's really scary. since he can one-tap me with basically all of his attacks, which pretty much becomes the norm at this point. Fun fact, I don't know if this was the case in the original, but he apparently always starts his fight with his Poison Breath attack now, which I just couldn't super guard for the life of me. So I had to use my Repel Cape to even get a shot at this fight. Then my best bet was to just buff up Goombella as much as possible and mess up the multi-bonk. It took me 6 attempts to get this right, but by buffing up Goombella a lot, I barely managed to beat him. Not gonna lie, this fight got me pretty scared about what's still to come. But before any of that, there's a nice break consisting of all the puzzles in here. The Dry Bone room does exist, but none of these guys are really all that bad by themselves. Once we're done with all this, it's already time for the next part of the endgame boss gauntlet. I entered this fight with Flurry for once, since I wanted to use Dodgy Fog right away, but just kinda didn't do that and immediately died. My strat for this fight was just going in with a lot of FP and then trying to keep these guys from doing anything as much as possible. Clockout does work really well on them, and I dodged the few attacks that would have hit me with Vivian, so this was actually going really well until I got unlucky with Belden. The next attempt was even better though. I used Dodgy Fog again, followed by more Clockouts and Power Lifts, and then just took care of the Sirens as quickly as possible. Dupless honestly becomes so much easier to guard once he copies Mario, so I just did that while slowly chipping away at the rest of his health. There's not a whole lot left now, but there are some really nice items in these last rooms. I got another Power Punch and even got my Repel Cape and Point Swap back. After clearing the last couple puzzles, it's time for the final stretch. Just 3 bosses left and that's it, starting with Grodus. You wouldn't believe how hard this challenge gets out of nowhere at this point. Nearly everything one-shots at this point, and completely perfect play is required in order to even stand a chance. Okay, so, my strat for this fight started out as having multi-bounce equipped to take care of his X, and then just dealing damage over time. However, that did not really work whatsoever. Instead it quickly became using my Repel Cape immediately and hoping I can even get past the first attack, then once again using all of the buffs I've got, killing his X using the Ice Storm I had left, and just dealing as much damage as possible. I just need to get extremely lucky with my Repel Cape / Super Guards and also pray to God that Grodus doesn't make my attack likely to miss, or just gives himself the counter buff, which just means I can't even attack him at all. The perfect multi-bonk did end up being enough to take care of him in one turn. But of course, that's not all, because after finally taking care of this guy, we are immediately thrust into the next fight. Now if you've played the remake, you probably know that it has a new feature upon dying. When you lose a fight, you get a prompt asking whether you want to start from your last save point or simply retry the fight again. I was extremely hopeful that the game somehow placed a checkpoint for this Bowser fight, but was met with great disappointment upon spawning back at the start of the room. Well, here we go again. I can't even properly explain how horrible this felt. I was so close to beating him and died to an attack that I had already previously super guarded a bunch of times. I didn't let that get me down though. Let's do that again. Finally, thank God. I was really hoping that the Shadow Queen wouldn't be quite as bad, especially since I had more items I could have used during those fights, but wanted to keep for this one. Well, no other way of finding out. Let's go give this a try. Yeah, I should probably just stop beating around the bush. This fight was hard, really hard. It honestly might be even harder than those last two, I'm not sure. It's not 2 really hard fights back to back, but she does have 3 separate phases that are all incredibly hard to get through. The first phase is definitely the easiest. It consists of a Peach form that you need to deal 60 damage to in order to trigger the next phase. Here she becomes invulnerable and your only goal is to survive 2 rounds of attacks from a true form, which sounds relatively simple, but of course everything that she does will also kill Mario in one hit, meaning everything needs to be super guarded. The fact that her attacks all have really hard timings and she has at least one attack that can't even be super guarded whatsoever certainly complicates things. And then there's her final phase. 150 HP and the same insane attacks from phase 2. Obviously my win condition was once again a super strong multi-bonk from Goombella. I was already attempting this for over an hour and testing out a bunch of different strategies before I decided to take a break. Yeah, I actually had no idea that this was in the game now, but I was sure as hell going to use this, because honestly I don't think this fight would have been beatable otherwise. My first thought was to just get another Mega Rush or Power Rush P, but those aren't really all that easy to get, so I just opted into getting a second Boo Sheet and a Repel Cape, which would be immensely helpful during the final phase. Let's find out if this new gear is enough to turn the tide. Wow, I can't believe that attempt went as well as it did. I don't know how much you could tell, but I actually feel like that was one of the hardest gaming challenges I've done in a while. Those last 3 bosses took me longer than like the first 5 chapters combined. Anyways, not much else to say except thank you for 1000 subs. It really means a lot. New videos coming soon and I swear they won't be about Paper Mario. Alright, that's about it from me. See ya.